Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals, it is Matt, and happy Pride. Today I'm here to talk about a book that made me want to die. That is right, finally I'm going to film my rant review for 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I originally finished the book, hated it so much that I immediately wanted to rant about it, but then I was watching a CJ the X video where he was talking a little bit about art. Love you, CJ. And in it made me just kind of reconsider if I wanted to do it. But weeks later, I've decided that yes, I do want to rant about this book because it is atrocious. It's just immoral. It's just so boring, too. Like, I found it entirely unredeemable. So, this book is by a Japanese author, and that is important to note because this book was obviously translated, and I feel like the translation is very bad. People say that they love Murakami's prose, but reading 1Q84, which is probably his most famous book, I couldn't stop thinking that it just felt so stilted and unnatural the way that it was written. And so I downloaded a sample in Japanese on like Amazon on Kindle and took a look at it in Japanese, and it was certainly way more readable. But I mean, still not something I'd enjoy. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about what this book deals with. This is a kind of surreal, magical realism-ish book that is about two characters. There's Aomame, which literally means green peas in Japanese, and there's Tengo. Aomame and Tengo were originally in the same class in like elementary school. They didn't interact at all except for this one occasion, and that one occasion was incredibly formative for them, and they've been longing for each other ever since, basically. And now they're like in their 30s, years later, and something a little bit odd happens. Aomame is in a taxi. She is late for an appointment, and she goes down this weird set of stairs, and once she passes down them, she seems to enter a different world, a world that has two moons. It takes place in 1984, and she calls this world 1Q84, and I actually do like the title 1Q84 because in Japanese, Q, like Kyu, U is how you say 9. So it's 1984 either way, kind of. And lowercase q looks like a 9. So I do like the title. But Aomame seems to enter this separate world where things are a little bit off. Aomame is a personal trainer who trains this woman called the Dowager. The Dowager gives her clients, or targets, I guess, men who have like beaten or battered, abused, and destroyed women, and Aomame goes out, meets with them, and kills them by shoving a spike into the back of their skull. So that's kind of her deal. And then the other perspective we're following, Tengo, is literally the most boring, useless, and disgusting character ever. And Tengo is basically a writer. He's writing his own book, but then this editor guy comes to him and talks about this book he's received called Air Chrysalis. Air Chrysalis was written by a 17-year-old girl named Fukaeri, and it's a magical realism book about a world with two moons and these beings called the Little People, and it's just this surrealist thing. Fukaeri is mentally diminished, incapacitated in some sort of way, but it seems to perhaps be mystical. Like her story, her magical story seems to kind of be based on her life. And so the editor brings this book to Tengo and gets him to basically spruce it up and kind of rewrite it and make it more presentable, and then they enter it into like the Hugo Awards, basically, and pretend like Fukaeri wrote the entire thing. And that's kind of what's going on with Tengo. But what the book really deals with is basically there is this cult called Sakigake, and Fukaeri ran away from there and seems to be traumatized and, like I said, mentally diminished. And there's something mystical maybe going on within the cult. And so the rest of the book basically just kind of follows these two characters as they slowly, and I mean slowly, glacially, molasses going up a hill in February slowly. Like, they slowly unravel this kind of mystery surrounding the cult. And that mystery, the magical realism element, was the only thing that kept me reading through this 800-page book. The book is told in 3 parts. The first 2 focus on Aomame and Tengo, and Tengo I hated for the entire book. I wish he had been cut out of it as a point of view character. And then part 3 adds a character called Ushikawa who's investigating Tengo in order to get to Aomame. And I was super excited when he showed up, and it was great. I was reinvested in the story because I was really struggling at that point. And I really liked Ushikawa for about 3 of his chapters, and then he just got just as boring as the other 2. So this magical realism mystery is the only thing that kept me reading through this awful, interminable 800-page book. And this isn't a spoiler. This is just so you know what you're going into. The mystery is completely abandoned. Some weird magical things just kind of happen in the book, but also aren't explained in the slightest bit. They don't even feel that metaphorical, honestly. But the mystery element of what's going on is just completely dropped. And it's it never even existed. And it's what is the point? So this was a book that I absolutely hated. The writing, stilted, awful, boring. The characters, Tengo is a fucking creep. He's disgusting. Aomame is a little bit more interesting, but she's also... Every character in this book is very boring because so much of this book is not even characters interacting with one another. It's characters sitting alone in their rooms thinking to themselves for the majority of the book. And I've certainly read books like that before. I've read Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. And, that was legible and actually interesting. But this book is literally just people's own introspection, but, not even interesting introspection. So what was the point? I hated this. And the kind of nail in the coffin for me is this book has so much unnecessary, disgusting, and weird sexual content. This book is full of just weird, out-of-place sex scenes that really don't make any sense to the story. They add absolutely nothing. They literally just make me and everyone else from the reviews I've seen feel uncomfortable. And, what's the point? Tengo is in bed with his MILF girlfriend, and they're just, having a whole conversation while she is just, cupping his balls and just, massaging them. And Tengo's introspection is just going on and on about his balls while they have this weird conversation. It's why? What is the point? Aomame, she has a bunch of lesbian fan service that is also very weird and uncomfortable too. It's not written in... None of the sex is written in, anything even approaching a sexy way. It's like an alien trying to understand humans is how it's written. And obviously the sexual content is bad enough on its own, but the part that infuriated me and just drove me absolutely insane is, 1, Tengo has sex with Fukaeri. Fukaeri, like I mentioned, is a 17-year-old girl with diminished capacity who is just very, very, just like oblivious and ignorant to the world around her. She doesn't seem to understand anything that well. And Tengo basically, like, has sex with her, but it's kind of described like she rapes him, but that's not what's happening. And that was just really, really gross, and the way it was written and described was bad. But the part that sealed the deal for me is the cult leader in this book has some sort of chronic illness that makes him live in constant agony. And sure, I relate. But he also has some sort of, he has these fits where he gets seizures where he is paralyzed. His entire body is paralyzed except for like his head for like 24 hours. And while he's paralyzed, he gets rock hard. And then these little 13-year-old, 14-year-old girls, his handmaidens, come in and they rape him. And oh, isn't he a poor little victim being raped by these children? But it's like, that's literally how it's written and described. And that's like, no, he's a cult leader. Obviously, the environments of the cult are having an effect on why these young girls are doing this. Like, obviously, the environment of being in a cult is not conducive to free will. And so these girls are either being like coerced, forced, or they're just brainwashed. But these girls are raping this poor old man when that is not the case whatsoever. And it was just absolutely disgusting. It was totally abhorrent. And for what? For what? This book drove me insane. There is also the mystery of the little people. Like I mentioned, the little people play no role. They're just kind of slightly described, just like kind of on the periphery in some throwaway sentences. And then we get a scene where like one crawls out of a dude's mouth. And that is the only answer we get to the little people. It's the only answer we get as to why there's kind of like this weird metaphysical war going on involving the little people and the forces right against them, Almame and Tengo. The little people are kind of like this malevolent force who are driving the cult. The little people are responsible for the cult in a way. And it's nothing about that is resolved in the slightest bit. So if you start the book and you're like, oh, I'm going to keep reading so that I can find out this mystery, just put the book down if you don't like it, because you don't find out anything. You don't find out anything whatsoever. So between the awful prose, the interminably long and drawn out introspection that goes nowhere, between the disgusting, weird, awful sex scenes, between the rape of young girls being justified, between just this entire atrocity of a book, I could not rate this any lower. Like, this is a book that I honestly would rate -1 star if I could. No, -4 stars. This book is legitimately the worst thing I've ever read in my entire life. Before that, the two worst things I'd read were Terry Goodkind and the Soldier Sun trilogy by Robin Hobb. Book 2 of the Soldier Sun trilogy drove me absolutely insane, and I hated it. But that book, I can at least recognize that Robin Hobb's writing is really, really great. It's really, really solid. It's just a shitty story. This book, on the other hand, has terrible writing, or terrible translation anyway, terrible characters, terrible plot, no action, nothing good. There's just nothing good about it. And if you are someone who's read 1Q84 and like it, or love it, because apparently lots of people love it, I need you to comment down below and let me know what about it you enjoyed, because I could not find anything redeemable in this book. So, I'm done ranting. I'm sure that was a little bit like incoherent. I was all over the place, but hopefully you understand why I hate the book so much, and maybe that will dissuade you from reading it and wasting your time on this piece of garbage. Anyway, happy Pride, you guys. Have a good one. Bye.